Hello, hello. Happy fall to everybody, and welcome to Department of Community Affairs, Community at the Core, our feature podcast. It's great to see everybody again. We are in happily episode 2 of this labor of love that we're doing at the department. And for folks that were able to tune into our last episode, Community at the Core is just what you're thinking it is. It's about connecting folks within the DCA community and those outward with the critical issues, priorities, and initiatives that the department is undergoing to make our community stronger, to thrive and grow. I'm excited today because we're in this season of change. I'm a fall baby, so this is my favorite time of year. And what better way to talk about change and I think evolving than to talk about where we are with technology and where we are with data and how we're really optimizing the various tools that are at our disposal and the experts that we have in our employ to drive the department and our communities further. And what I love so much about what's happening at the department is that while we're in this world of data, and you're going to hear from some of our best at the department on these subjects and their perspectives, it's really about a center on human intelligence. And what's exciting is we've got a great intersectionality happening at the department where our data tools are really thriving off of what we're finding with trends, conditions, and concepts that are really amongst human behavior and amongst what is really priorities for our programmatic work. And I'm excited today because we've got 3 feature folks that come from very specific spaces in our department that work really cohesively together to make sure that our data and really the information behind our data is cogent, transparent, and is of benefit to our department employees and to communities afar. So I'm just excited today to have all 3 of you. Thank you for joining. I want to start off, just give some bios so folks really understand who we have in play. And these are all folks that I think have been really in trenches, right? So, I think you can talk about data intellectually and, academically, but these are folks who are knife and teeth kind of in the field, looking at how we can make some improvements and how we can really expand our information resource as a department. So first, I just want to introduce our Director of Information Technology for the department, John Harrison. Thank you, John, for joining. John's been with the department for several years. He works with all of the business groups to optimize processes and deliver world-class software solutions on time and on budget, our favorite adisms, John. And he has made sure that this passion has stayed with him, not just at the department, but throughout his career. John's an avid, I'd say, intellectual on technology, on where data is going, and even on that AI, John, as I know you've been exploring.
Absolutely.
And I think, I want to give credit to John. He was one of the early embracers of when we've looked at a lot of these cloud native technology platforms, right? Making sure we've got things like Microsoft Azure, as well as various types of AI, document intelligence, generative AI, agentic AI, really into the helm of our systems. And I think in a lot of ways, probably getting ourselves ahead of the curve throughout the state itself. His efforts have really, truly led to some great improvements in the areas of field operations, how we're looking at utility benefits and the like. What I think has also been a great feature of John's leadership as the Director of IT is that we've made sure that communication and commitment to really get these projects forward has really made us yield some results, ones that you can see and that are being used every day. John's a proud father of a teenage son who just started college. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're getting towards the end. I'm excited for you. I've got a 5-year-old. I'm right at the beginning.
There you go.
And you're an avid scuba diver.
Sure.
And obviously enjoyed paradise vacations on that end.
Just swam with some whale sharks about a week ago.
And you still came back.
I did.
Well, that's how exciting data is at DCA.
Exactly.
We're better than swimming with sharks. Just putting that out there for folks who want to join the department. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Next, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Dr. Christopher Wheeler, who's our Chief Data Officer for the Department of Community Affairs. Dr. Wheeler is responsible for the department's data analysis and reporting functions, conducts research, performs extensive program evaluations for the Commissioner's Office and various divisions across the department. I consider Dr. Wheeler to be an all hands on deck. He's a generalist and an expert and is able to offer so many solutions when we're scratching our heads. Dr. Wheeler holds a PhD in public affairs from Rutgers University, go RU, Scarlett. From Camden, a master's degree in government administration from University of Pennsylvania, and a bachelor's degree in political science from Temple University. And I've got to give credit where credit's due. Dr. Wheeler has, really been somebody who has plugged and played in a lot of the initiatives and concepts. We are excited because even internally in the department, we've started a bit of a data hub. And, I think that's the brainchild of all three of you. And I know, Chris, you had been percolating about that for a bit, especially in COVID times.
Oh, yeah.
When we had so many questions and we needed the answers yesterday. So welcome, Dr. Wheeler. We're excited to have you as well and your expertise.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Gavin Rozzi, who is our director for the Division of Housing Community Resources Data Center within the Department of Community Affairs. And for folks that don't know, housing is really one of our main breads and butters at the department, right? We are the largest housing authority in the state. And more significantly, we provide many families across the state with the ability to have affordable housing through our production or through rental assistance support. That work is so quintessential, not just, I think, within the housing space, but in a lot of our areas. When you're looking at local government support, when you're looking at sound planning, at fire safety, at codes and standards. And so our housing work, I think, lends true to every other auspices of our department. And Gavin has been really key in a division-wide strategy to make sure we've got data governance, analytics, and modern digital services that support our housing, eviction prevention, lead safety, and other critical life programs, right, and social programs. In this role, he oversees an enterprise data warehouse, a portfolio of data products, and some interactive websites. We've also made sure that there's some cloud-native platforms that convert some of the raw information, and trust me, the state has a lot of raw data, into actionable insights for policymakers, for the public, and for our staff. And I can't understate that, right? A lot of the way that we look at data is how it's going to have us improve our program performance. And Gavin and his team are a big part of that. Prior to joining DCA, Gavin built a reputation in New Jersey's civic technology community as the founder of several open data projects in urban informatics research. His work has consistently focused on using technology and transparent data practices to strengthen public institutions and improve community outcomes. Gavin, we're delighted to have you as well.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to kick off with all of you because, I was looking a bit at, where we were going to focus, I think, the plethora of information we can have about data and what that conversation is and why does it matter? Why does it matter when us as a government agency needs to provide services to taxpayers? And I wanted to start off with a quote because I thought it was actually, pretty informed and I think a bit of the missive that we've tried to carry as a team. Carly Fiorina, who was the former Hewlett-Packard CEO, said, "The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight." So I want to kick off a little bit, and I'm going to throw this first to you, Dr. Wheeler, as our Chief Data Officer. From your seat and perspective, how has the department's investment in data shifted the culture of decision-making? Where have we gotten more intentional? Maybe where have we also had some lessons learned in that regard?
Well, I think we've made a lot of progress over the last 5 years. We've made a number of investments in data that have contributed to an evidence-based decision-making culture across the department. We've recently been making extensive use of Power BI dashboards, and we've been able to use that tool to produce near real-time analytics on constituent and legislative inquiries, department expenditures, and grant activity. And this has really allowed the department to put its spending and payments to specific vendors and grantees in historical context that we didn't have before. So we can look up a history for any particular vendor or grantee that is coming before the department for a grant and see, hey, what did we pay them 5 years and 10 years? And that can be used in decision-making for that process. We're also able to track how quickly we're responding to constituent and legislative inquiries through our CTS dashboard that we've created. And we also are able to gauge the volume of outreach to the department throughout the year using that dashboard. And this has really helped us focus on clearing up any backlogs and inquiry responses and also measure progress in being responsive to the citizens that we serve. We also have recently released a new and improved DCA Data Hub, which is our official open data portal, and this has increased the visibility and accessibility of our public-facing data. And internally, it's made this information more readily available across the department for grant applications, program design, and evaluations.
Yeah, and what I love hearing about just a few of those initiatives is that it sounds to me like we're trying to really be responsive to some pain points that our citizens are facing, right? And you had noted even our constituent tracking system. For folks that don't know and anybody who's ever run into government before, we get inquiries, we get questions. and they range from a variety of issues. But one of the challenges I think that we endeavor in any government agency is the responsiveness. And what I love about these examples that you gave, Dr. Wheeler, is that by having some automation in some of this, by being able to pull up historical reference, have reference points, we're not just making decisions in a vacuum. And I got to give a shout out to Commissioner Suarez, right? And one of our, missives at the department is, being really intentional and having data-driven decisions, not saying it is because we said so, or a fun government adage, we've always done it this way, which makes, I think, everybody's eye twitch at the end of the day. We like to come from DCA of saying, we're going to back up what we're saying, and here's why. And we're going to make it transparent. We're not going to just give you a cryptic answer or give a random fact, and then that was in a vacuum. And so what is so smart about some of this work and what you and the entire team have done is saying, we're going to have tools that aren't just going to inform us on how we're assessing and improving, but also that give a snapshot and an insight for our citizens that we serve every day. Now, I think pivoting a bit to that, because that gives me and makes me think about housing, right? Which is, I think, one of the seminal challenges we're facing today in our state and across the country. Now, Gavin, I wanted to turn to you a little bit because when I think about housing and the data, I think we've gotten smarter about this. I think that we've gathered a lot more information, especially in the past few years. And like it or love it, COVID in a lot of ways made a good force point, right? And had us improve and improve more quickly. I wanted to hear a little bit about what have you observed with housing data and how's that's changed or structured one or two of our programs here at the department.
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. So I would have to point to the division's portfolio of lead safety programs here for just a real, true shining example of data for action. So when we had stood up the municipal lead reporting portal, we wanted to enable it to deliver, a comprehensive whole of government approach to ultimately get to the point where kids are not going to get sick from lead paint. So how that has changed our programs here at the division, we have the lead remediation and abatement program. And, we are moving from this concept of data for compliance towards data for action. So we have designed a data-driven feedback loop such that, when a municipality is submitting inspection results, we're not just putting those results into a filing cabinet or a database and nothing is happening. Through the programs that we have stood up, when there are positive findings for lead-based paint hazards, we're immediately able to connect those individuals with our grantees through the division to enable rapid response to some of these lead safety issues. So it's really been encouraging because, again, instead of just filing away inspection results, we are using this to create a feedback loop that ultimately enables better services for our constituents, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think the lead portal work is a great example. And for folks that may not know, the department is charged with kind of two arms, I think, in this fight to address lead and deal with safety preventions. And we've got one arm, right, which is our Division of Codes and Standards. And so there was law passed a few years back, right, that dealt with lead-based paint, right, in rental dwellings. And so one of the critical, or 1 and 2 family dwellings, I should say. And one of the critical areas was making sure that there were standards set across the state for towns, obviously depending on what were really assessed exposure data, I think, from DOH on elevated blood lead levels for children, making sure that those inspections were occurring, that towns were enforcing and making sure that was standardized. But then on the other side of the shop, we've got our housing division that received a substantive amount of funding for lead remediation and abatement. And so on that arm, we've got our division partners in housing making sure that we're actually going out, and when that hazard's identified from an inspection, we've got the funding and we've got grantees that can go out and support it. What's smart to me about this and what, Gavin, you, the team, and all of our kind of compliments at DCA have done is saying, we've got to talk. We've got to make sure that each side of the house knows what's going on and that we can create an accountability loop for the towns as well. And what is so critical when I hear also kind of talking about this is we're deciding to say when we're looking at this data work, because this is a massive collection of properties, right? We all know Jersey's pretty packed tight with a lot of dwellings. This will allow us to actually almost stage this a bit and move through these dwellings in a way that everybody's informed of what's going on, and we can give external data as well, correct?
Yeah, we actually have another shout out to the DCA Data Hub as a part of our initiatives here. We have a near real time compliance dashboard. So anybody through our resources on the Data Hub, they can go in and check in on the status of their particular municipality or county, really, kind of ushering in a new level of transparency for these types of initiatives. Ultimately, getting us closer to that point of making sure no kids get sick from lead-based hazards.
And I want to also kind of shout out too on this lead element. And when I first started in the department in 2021, I remember actually starting, and I was with you, Dr. Wheeler, and another one of our colleagues, and the law had just passed. I remember I heard there's a lead law, a little bit of a lead law coming out, and I don't think any of us realized how transformative it was. And what I look at it is that in that moment of challenge, it actually was incredible opportunity. And Dr. Wheeler, I remember, you've been working incredibly in step with our DOH partners, right? And even when we've been looking at lead mapping and where we're looking at that PLEM map from DOH and that support in DEP, we're really showing some true state cross collaboration, not just internal, but also external with us sharing this data, which I think that hasn't always been happening. That's a last couple year kind of element. And Dr. Will, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Absolutely. Very proud of the work we've done with Department of Health and Environmental Protection and getting some of our data layers on these housing units that are vulnerable to having lead hazards onto that statewide PLEM map. So we have a one-stop map statewide that you can access, DOH, DEP, and DCA data from one location to find out where these areas are that have the highest lead hazards.
And, when we think about the everyday citizen, visual, being clear about where these things are, I mean, that was not always in existence. So I feel like every time we're giving in that layer, every time we're really showing process, that's going to instill also more confidence, right? In our civic obligation. So I want to pivot a little bit because, we've talked, I think, a little bit about some big picture, right? And I think the general vision, but the numbers are why we're here, right? And the numbers are what have helped us make really smart decisions. So I want to turn actually a bit to you, John. When you've been kind of evaluating, I think, the really fast-moving shift we've made, what are you seeing as some of the biggest kind of technical challenges in integrating all of this data into these systems? And let me give the caveat too, we're working with probably some age systems, right? We've got some graduation that's happening, and shout out to Office of Information Technology, right? Our state partners trying to get us into some contemporary systems, but we've got age concept. Government does not move as fast as private, and I know you know both worlds. So can you give a little insight on that?
Right. Well, I think the most important thing is to work with the members like Gavin and Dr. Wheeler and the other development team members to see what they need and kind of start with an analysis of needs and design an architecture and then figure out what technologies need to be brought in and what platforms need to be brought in. So we try not to start with the platforms. We try to end with those. So that's our key challenge, is not putting the cart in front of the horse, and let the technology will come. There's lots of tools out there, and what's key is getting the right mix of tools, right? So there's some tools that do the same thing. Well, you don't need two of those. You can only have that in one place. So I've worked with Gavin and Dr. Wheeler and the other development teams to analyze what do we need, and what we do in IT. We're kind of an internal department, customer service for the businesses, and we'll go through that evaluation with them, and then we go through the procurement of that and the maintenance of that. We try to bring in world-class things. We were talking about we try to be leading edge, not bleeding edge. So we are ahead of the curve. We're certainly leaders in the state. As far as challenges with technology, the point is getting the right mix of technology. So I work with the businesses, with Gavin, Dr. Wheeler, the other development organizations to analyze the needs, architect a solution, and then bring in the platforms at that point and make sure they're complementary.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to note, right, it almost is a bit of a fact-finding mission. What I've observed, I think, from the entire team, and even when we have, these internal data hub meetings, is we almost have to take like an investigative eye. Like I feel like you almost have to Sherlock Holmes it a bit of, okay, here's this great technology, or here's an issue. and then almost figuring out those intentional steps or clues to get us to where we've got a technology that actually meets the need and does it in a way that
100%.
also streamlines into what our existing structures. And, for folks that work in government, but for folks that may not know this, there are institutions in place, right? And so we work within certain constraints, and the magic, I think, happens when you find that middle. But it is a middle, and it does take, I think, a very key interactive process that I'm hearing from all of you. And that gives me a pivot point I wanted to talk about, right? When we look at the numbers, right, that only tells a partial story. And I think what's been so promising and positive about what the department is doing is that we don't just look at the numbers. We're looking at the people, the lived experience. And so, Dr. Wheeler, I was curious from you, and, you've had to plug and play in this as we've looked at a variety of just social issues that then intersect with the department. How do we ensure our numbers, our data, are able to be paired with the context and lived experience of our residents and driving that policy in a way that really is in the right direction?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of our reports, we try to put the data that we have in context. We look at other similar reports that have been done, based on national or statewide trends. We combine the data that we do collect with recent history and also data on national and regional trends to put whatever we're seeing for New Jersey in context with what's happening, beyond New Jersey. We do this in our quarterly internal key indicators reports and also our annual housing market trends reports. And to your point about the lived experience, in our program evaluations, we do seek input from grantees and the citizens that they serve in the form of surveys. And this adds really important context to whatever findings we're getting from the actual hard data. A couple examples of this was our neighborhood revitalization tax credit evaluation we did a number of years ago. We surveyed our grantees, and they also gave us some information from residents on what they were seeing in their neighborhoods, what kind of progress they were seeing, and what kind of challenges they were experiencing. So we were able to get that data, and it actually matched very well with what we were seeing in terms of the census data, in terms of home values and incomes. We were able to really develop some really robust recommendations for transforming that program based on that locally based feedback and the data, and really made some progress in making that even more of a successful program in terms of evidence-based allocation of funding. Another example is our urban enterprise zone program evaluation, which we did with a consultant. They surveyed the UEZ coordinators who actually run the local programs, and they were able to use some of that feedback in their overall evaluation. So we've intentionally taken some steps to bring that lived experience and local context into our numbers. And this enables us to couch whatever data numbers that we're seeing quantitatively in terms of lived experience and added depth that sometimes can be lacking from just a straight analysis of numbers.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about the intersectionalities here, right? And you were noting that. When we look at an issue, let's just take homelessness, right? We have, I think, found over the time it's never in a vacuum, right? There's a combination of societal, right, financial or economic impacts. There's the actual property itself. There's the structuring of that particular town or municipality, and then there's also just social factors, right? We've got federal impacts. You have trade implications. You have, a lot of movement that when we're able to look at this data in this layering fashion and pull that together, that's when we're able to really have a true sense of the temperature, right? And what that landscape actually is.
Absolutely. That's an excellent example. We did a quantitative analysis of the determinants of homelessness. So, is that linked to SNAP participation or income levels?
Right.
We found there were connections. But we also have information from the actual point in time count on the reasons for homelessness that people are actually citing, when the providers are asking them. So we were able to pair that data and really get a robust picture of what causes homelessness. And it can be many different things. Loss of a job, eviction from a shared residence is a top contributor to it. But also, those economic conditions give rise to higher homelessness, but also, a lack of affordable housing. We find that in the data is a very important influence. So just using that kind of local-based survey method in concert with the quantitative data that we analyze, we're able to get a very robust picture as to what's happening with homelessness in New Jersey and how it's affected by different factors.
And I think that's important because when we talk about these subjects, and I mean, these are subjects that are in everyone's home, right? Everyone needs a home. Everyone wants to have food security. Everybody wants to have education, right? These are all concepts. And we want to be in safe, healthy, productive communities. What I think is also really telling in some of this work is, we get asked a lot of questions, right? And people want to say, well, why is it this? Or is it just throw this money? Or is it this singular problem? And I think what the data has shown us is that we've got to clear out the bias around these concepts, right? People have assumptions about housing. They have assumptions about, certain economic development and planning. And when we're able to show those numbers, we can really take away that unconscious bias that can kind of come in from the lived experience and get back to some of this quantitative data. And people then start to better understand this subject matter.
Absolutely.
I want to pivot a little bit on that subject, but stay in lens. I think, to your point, even about housing homelessness, right? Gavin, I was curious from you, what have we found to be a bit of an eye-opening trend or pattern or something we found as a surprise as we've looked at housing data over the last few years?
So great question. And as I was thinking about this, I took a look actually at some of the analytics data that's coming in from our NJ eviction guide. So for the audience that may not be familiar with it, we recently had the pleasure of launching NJ eviction guide as a really important self-service resource in collaboration with our Office of Eviction Prevention that kind of helps people understand where they're at in the process, know their rights, and get connected with resources. So, as one of our first public-facing web development projects, this has been an interesting source of analytics data for us because we've been collecting it in a privacy-respecting manner, no personal information, but analyzing some of the events and usage trends in the platform since it's been out for a few months or so. And we saw an interesting trend in the sense that, we've got a lot of raw traffic, just raw visits to the site, which somewhat tapered off. So, there's an old saying, the obvious isn't always correct. Mm-hmm. The conventional wisdom may be that activity is dropping off. However, that is dead wrong. We found a very interesting metric in the sense that our user engagement and time spent on the site has been dramatically increasing since the launch. And that suggests to us that although there may be a lower raw hit count, people are engaging with it a lot more substantively. They're not just looking at it for 10 seconds and then going somewhere else. They're really using it to understand their rights. So I think in data, to some of the earlier points from Dr. Wheeler about putting the numbers in context, we can't just look at one metric. And, I like to use this as an example of, really zooming out and looking at the whole picture to understand how people are engaging with our programs and how we can use this to drive action and ultimately do a better job. So really exciting and really eye-opening there.
Yeah. Tracking that movement helps us be informed on behavior. And it also helps us see maybe where we're going to go next or where people may have that struggle point. It's encouraging to hear that people are spending time, right? That also tells us that if we've got a tool or resource, this isn't somebody saying, this doesn't make any sense and right off it. Because I think we all know we're in 2025, the attention span is 20 seconds, and that's on a good, probably TikTok reel. So knowing that we've got people who are saying, okay, let me move and navigate this, the exposure of that information is telling in and of itself. So I think kind of pivoting a little bit, what's valuable in hearing all of you talk is that we've got some overlap in what our intentions are, but we've got some distinctions in these roles to really make sure that the band is coming together for a singular sound, right, and a position on data. I want to hear a little bit briefly from you all, just a bit of a walk in the day of the life. How are your roles and functionality kind of in the department, and where does that interplay? And John, I'd like to start with you as our Director of Information Technology, because I take you to be a little bit of the conductor on some of this band.
We try to be, to that, we try to collaborate, like I said before, work with Gavin's team. They're working with a lot of great technologies. We try to make sure that it's going to fit within DCA and with the state and make sure, we're not too bleeding edge, but we like them to be the tip of the sword on some things because they know how to do it and they do great work.
Right.
We try to, I try to establish platforms that work, like I said, are complementary. We put in Power BI years ago. We showed Chris what it could do, and now we've got an enterprise license, so it's easier for him to create things and share them, internally throughout. So it's a lot of incremental things and just constant communication. That's one of the keys to everything is communication, and so that's what we do. And we want to empower the organization to use different tools. So even if it's the great minds like Gavin and his team, we want to empower the other users and staff and management throughout the organization to use some of these platforms and tools. You don't have to be a developer to create some solutions. You don't have to be a data scientist to use Power BI.
Right.
And so, like I said, it all comes back to communication. Gavin and his team let us know what they want to use. Chris will come to us and say, what about this or that? And we'll talk about it and we'll see what we can do.
What I also think is valuable is that the exposure that we can continue to do to share, I think, with our staff of here's this tool, here's this resource, right? We're talking about what we're doing. I also think it's creating a bit of a comfort point, right, for folks that are a little bit murky about data, or they like their paper, or they want to kind of go by intuition or gut, right? Not right, wrong, or indifferent. Having this continuous process where we're bringing in more, we're sharing this information, we're making it so that people can utilize it, I think is also making this contagious in a very good way. Dr. Wheeler, speak a little bit, I think, where you kind of step and play. And I think, you and John have been I think of you almost like a bit of a WWE wrestling match, right? Sometimes you guys are kind of slapping into the ring a little bit to try to cover these field and position. But, I think, you tap into a little bit throughout the department as well, right?
Sure, yeah, and I think I work with John Harris on a number of important data initiatives, building out a DCA a warehouse. We've been working with him on using Databricks as a platform for that, so we're laying the seeds for that. Just bringing in Power BI as a resource really enabled us to do a tremendous amount of work on public-facing dashboards. We've been producing quite a few of them in the recent months, and also some internal dashboards, so we have real-time business analytics for our leadership to understand what's going on in terms of expenditures and also inquiries that are coming into the department. And I work with Gavin on a couple initiatives as well. Contributed some data for his really wonderful NJ Homes Choice tool, a wonderful resource for municipalities to kind of plan their affordable housing obligations, how they're going to meet them. We're able to provide some data from the courts to support that initiative. And we also work together on a couple other things. We're working on getting an automated version of our SAGE grant dashboard so we can understand what's going on in terms of our grant activity in real time. So really happy to collaborate with both of these gentlemen on these issues, and it's always a pleasure to work collaboratively with them.
Yeah. So yeah, both infrastructure, but also some of these external resources, right? And I think that's probably why we've been making sure that anything we're rolling out is speaking to each other. And what I've appreciated watching all of you and even some of our other folks of the hub is that it's always this question of, is this workable here, but how is this actually going to be received or helpful for our constituents, right, for who we're serving? Gavin, talk a little bit about, I know you're kind of housing focused, but, where do you kind of step and play with that data center element?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo the comments of my colleagues. I think both Dr. Wheeler and John, they have been crucial partners in the success of a lot of these initiatives, because I think we like to think and start with that global vision, but a lot of our day-to-day work in housing really comes down to the stakeholder engagement angle. We try to kind of meet our customers where they are. I like to kind of think of my team as the internal consulting team throughout the division, because we have a very large breadth and depth of programs, and a lot of them have very complex needs. Importantly, with the division, many of our constituents and consumers are folks that are some of the most vulnerable people in New Jersey when you're dealing with homelessness and eviction and a lot of those other situations. So really, I like to think that we are all kind of rowing globally at the department in the same direction, and each of us kind of all have our own unique role to play based on the positions that we occupy. So thinking about how we can become data-driven as a department, it really comes down to a lot of laying down that successful infrastructure. And I think we've made some tremendous strides between the Power BI enterprise agreement. That has enabled us at the division to work directly with some of our program leadership to create analytics reports to drive the decisions in their respective programs. And especially, with a lot of the highly contextualized, really solid economic research that Dr. Wheeler and his team are putting out, that has given us important context to know where we should pivot and where we should target next. And ultimately, it all kind of comes together in that harmonious whole as we bring a lot of these really exciting initiatives out to our broader community.
Yeah, and I think, what I'm hearing, I think from all of you is, it's so critical now more than ever that we're, taking some of these tools and making it really an opportunity to just evolve and get sharper and proactive, right? And I think a lot of times when folks maybe hear about government, it's the response, right? We're on the back end or we're a hurdle or a barrier. And I think what's valuable is we're saying we're going to give this information. We're going to make it clear for everybody. We're going to make it so that everyone understands where the direction of these taxpayer dollars are going. And more significantly, that people get to see, I think, a return on that investment, right? And I wanted to pivot as well, I think, in the subject just briefly on just the trust, right, and the transparency. And I think modern day, we're dealing in this world of AI, of a lot of data, of there almost being, I think, a sense of a hypersaturation of that information and people not knowing, I think, where to have a scrutiny eye, a discernment, or even just a fear. How do you all look, and I pitch this out to the group, how do you balance this obligation to some transparency and trust? How do you all evaluate the data and figure out how we're making this digestible for who we serve, but also that we're maintaining it in this very responsible and intentional manner?
I'll start off that one thing with AI, since you're talking specifically about AI. The approach that I'm taking here is to become experts in AI, but become experts on internal systems. So I'm cautious about turning AI out to the public,
Right.
and with all the issues with data privacy that come along with that. As long as we keep it in-house, we can, you can make mistakes in-house and they stay in-house. So we have it as a tool for our internal people to understand policy and similar cases when they're doing adjudications. We don't have AI making any decisions. They provide the information to the staff, and it allows them, and we've already been using some AI internally to, for instance, evaluate when a case is ready to be adjudicated. So somebody applies for USF or LIHEAP benefits, things like that. What would happen in the past is an adjudicator would start to work the case and then realize not all the documentation they needed to make an adjudication was there. Now with document intelligence, we can pull all that. We can have a high confidence factor that this case is ready to be adjudicated. And we've made tremendous advances on how long it takes to turn around a case. So we make those incremental things and those incremental changes and those incremental internal technologies just allows great benefit on the back end. We've gone from 165 days to adjudicate a case down to 25 days.
Wow.
So under 6 months to under a month. And 25 days for somebody to submit a full case down to under 10 days to make sure there's a little back and forth of what you need there.
What I love hearing in that iteration is that that can build trust. When we improve on processing times, right? When we take something that is a requirement, right? Because we're government and we set standards and we make it efficient, that helps for our citizenry, right? They're able to feel like, oh wow, here's a shift here. This makes my life a little bit easier.
Right, and part of this is that there's not one big answer that we're going to do this and it's going to make everything better. Like I said, we try to bring in platforms, try to make incremental improvements, try to stay on the leading edge, use it where it's appropriate, and we've shown that over time over the last couple of years about these big process improvements that we've made.
Dr. Wheeler, any words to add?
Sure. So as far as what we publish and making those decisions, we're careful not to publish data that has sensitive personal information in it. That's the first thing we consider. But what we publish is often determined by what state law requires, such as the property tax data and also the affordable housing data. But we also make decisions on what's really truly has value to the public that we serve. We think about how a particular data set will help our grantees and stakeholders understand the statewide and local conditions better, and whether it really gives them actionable intelligence on what's happening in terms of housing production, economic trends, and demographic changes. And over time, we've been moving toward visualizations through data dashboards to make data more understandable and to put it in the proper context. Our affordable housing and municipal housing profile dashboards are really good examples of interactive tools that allow users to visualize data based on their own selections. And this helps facilitate understanding of the trends and patterns within the data.
And I think when I hear a bit about that, it seems to me that we're heading into a direction where we're trying to really take a lot of this intake, right, and globalize it in a way that is going to be user friendly. And it seems to me when we're talking, I think in the realm of government transparency, right, usability is really at the forefront for folks, right? If there's even this perception of a barrier in process, right, it erodes that public trust. So, I think when you hear, I think some of these technical nuances, I don't think can be understated that every little brick we build to make this efficient, to make it clear, to have it communicate with each other, and to spit it out in a way that's digestible for the everyday person, that will engender us, I think, to be in better position where government, where citizenry, right, is really collaborative, right, even more than where it is now. So couple more questions before we close out today, and I think this is tremendously helpful, and I know we're going to make sure to post some information on where all these resources are. You've heard of a lot of great tools, so I'm just going to make sure we shout that out. You'll see a little bit of that in the follow-up for social media posts to really just see what these tools are, because we don't have nearly enough time to show all those advantages. But let's imagine we've got all the resources in the world, we're flush with cash, DCA has no limitations on the lovely world of data tools. I'd like to hear from each of you, what would be your dream tool or upgrade that you'd want to bring to the department with what we need to, do to support our communities today? Gavin, what would you do?
Yeah, I think I would definitely want to see continued investment with the appropriate guardrails in AI. I think there's a lot of exciting tools out there. However, as we've navigated a lot of the costs associated with it, the costs are coming down, but still, it's very easy to run up a substantial amount of charges there. So I think what I would like to see is that dovetailed with, more breaking down the silos to enable both cross-agency and external data sharing, because I think that transparency truly builds trust. And a lot of that all comes down from having a robust infrastructure in place. So I would love to see more investments in that infrastructure, because I think, that's something that will truly continue to pay dividends for, enhanced service delivery, trust, and transparency.
Ditto.
A man of few words, but the right ones, John. I know that about you. I have to echo that too. I mean, I think when I think about AI, to me, it helps improve human performance, and imagine the efficiencies, the time that we would get back, the pure process improvements that would come when we let that be a part of it, right? Not leading it, not being the final decider, because I think we all have the Terminator nightmare in our heads, right? We don't want AI to be the final decision maker, but it is a way that will optimize our human excellence, right? It'll optimize the way that we can be creative, our decision making, and be fast about it. Dr. Wheeler.
Well, I would just say ditto to that as well.
All right.
But I
Great
would
minds.
love just having a single platform where we could share data from some of our sister agencies. It would just be so
Yes.
amazing to get client-specific
That's
data
the dream.
from human services or health to be able to pair with our own internal data and bring context on how our clients have been served by other state programs and receive other services. And that could give us even more analytic ability. We can do longitudinal analysis or what has happened to an individual as they've gone through different state programs, and how have they been kind of dealt with by these programs, and what have been the outcomes. And that would really give us even more actionable intelligence on how we can really maximize value to the clients that we serve.
I think that's absolutely right, and I feel like that's all of us are saying. That's the Emerald City dream, because when we're government wonks, right? And for folks who are listening, right, we're all of the same ilk. But if you ask your parent, your grandparent, right, your aunt or uncle about government, they say government is government is government. They don't know Department of Community Affairs from Department of Health. We're just state government, right? And same thing I'd say even local. And in a way, I think we've got to actually meet people where they are. To what you said, Gavin, it's like we've got to globalize. And if we really want to put our money where our mouth is with that investment, I think it would be incredibly valuable that if we took our toolkit with all the other ones and then that was able to be transparent to the user, to the constituent, how much better we could be responsive in services and how much more efficient we'd be with taxpayer dollars because we know how to capital stack it better. So I'm going to close with this because I think it's important to say where we're going next. And I agree with what John and all of you had said. Like, I think we're ahead of the curve at DC. I think New Jersey's ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. But I want to hear from each of you to close out this fantastic episode. Where do you see us going in the next 5 years, right? When we look at the areas, and I think our two kind of, key buckets are, affordable housing, right? And community development. What's the vision that you're hoping to see or that you think we're going to go to in the world of data and supporting those kind of key structures within our state? Gavin.
So I believe that we are on the path right now with some of the investments we've already made at the department to have some of our public-facing and resident-facing apps have the same experience as some of the best consumer-grade apps like on your smartphone. I think with some of the investments that we are making in having an in-house development capability are going to be opening up new things that, we didn't even think were possible in the past. And I think, between the leadership that our department has brought to this and through working collaboratively with John, Chris, and my team, I'm really excited to see where we continue to go. And, tools like NJ Homes and Eviction Guide, they're only just the surface that we're scratching here.
I think that's right. Dr. Wheeler?
Yeah, well, I think, in the future, we'll probably be producing a lot more data dashboards, getting a lot of our data that's within our internal resources out there to the public, and really just making it easy to understand by having the Power BI functionality where you can pick a particular municipality or grantee and then get an instant data summary. You can see trends over time and really understand the data in a very profound way. And we've been moving in that direction. I think there's some additional opportunities where we can produce some more dashboards that'll really help citizens and stakeholders understand the landscape that they're working in terms of housing and community development, and also hopefully facilitate decision making on where to locate affordable housing and the types of housing that might work for certain communities.
I think that's right. John?
Yeah, I'll say that I think, as Chris said, we have a lot of good infrastructure already, and it's allowing us to make progress. And I would like to see that expanded to the staff. It's already with some of the business units in there. They're looking at dashboards, Power BI dashboards we've developed internally for them. They're adjusting their business processes and their resources to focus on certain areas. So I'd like to see that expanded out into like every unit knows how to use dashboards and is making those type of data-driven decisions. So that's great. So therefore, the two things for the future, back to the investments in AI, I think that that's not even a 5-year thing. We're doing things right now. There's going to be major advancements, things that we're putting in for inspections, fire code inspections, construction code inspections that are going to be coming out in the next couple months. So I think, in the next year or two, what I'd like to see also on AI is to deal with our legacy systems that are some of them are ancient. And you can start to take AI and put it onto the code and put it onto the data and say, okay, recreate this in a modern platform. And it's really transforming that. So I think that's going to be great. So that's something on the near horizon I'd really like to get. And then on the far horizon, going back to exactly what you said, that statewide level of maybe a Databricks solution where all the state level is in there. Like you say, everybody assumes that, oh, you're the state. All the data is in one place. Well, no, it's not. And that always has been the dream when I talk to the other CIOs. That is the dream of having that common data set. And I think just as, states are the labs of democracy, I think the different executive agencies are the labs of technology and things like that and data-driven approaches. And I think with what DCA is doing and how we're bringing data together from the different business units, we're kind of a patchwork agency. If you have a government program where you don't know where to put it in DCA. We do good with that.
Yes.
Uh,
The
so-
community
Right.
and affairs of it all.
Right. So if we can start to match our housing data with our housing inspection data, with our fire code data, and we can prove that we can bring these things, and we're doing that right now, well, we can do that at the state level. So so that would be great for us in 5 years, where we've really got a machine really humming, and we can be that proof of concept for the state.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I appreciate all those answers. I appreciate the expertise today. And, I think what's such a great takeaway is, we're in a really important watershed moment, and we've got a lot of agency of the way in which data, this AI, can really make human experience better, right? And at the DCA, right, as you had said, we get a little bit of everything at the department, but it allows us, I think, to be tapped in to almost kind of every facet of kind of public engagement that our communities have. When we let the data guide us on that, we're going to be able to do it objectively and equitably. I'm excited to see where we go next. I'm also excited to see, I think, in the next few years, where DCA, but also the state's going to go and saying, we're going to let data really be the first stop in the conversation, not the assumptions, not what's happened historically. And I think every initiative we have, every tool we're getting out there, and every conversation that we're generating from this, we're getting trust with our staff and we're getting trust with our citizens. So I thank you all for this. I'm excited for this episode. For folks that want to hear more, check this out, like on our socials, and share it out with your communities, right? We do this work and we share this information. We have our experts here because we do this in service to all of you. So get the word out. You have questions, contact the department. You'll have our info there. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate having you, Gavin, John, Dr. Wheeler here with us today. Looking forward to seeing what we have next on the curve. And let us make sure we just stay ahead of the machines, as they say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.